Welcome to Parent Squad. I'm Felicia Lawrence, and today's focus is something that we know a lot of parents are talking about: food dyes and additives. And it's a very hot topic. Earlier this year, the FDA announced plans to phase out certain dyes by the end of 2027. Joining me today to talk more about what all this means and what you can do now to clean up your cupboards is Riley Dietitian Taylor Parrish. Taylor, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So they are making some changes, but as that just said, 2027.
Yeah.
That's still some time away. You know, you want to be able to make this and have your family eating healthier now immediately. So what are food additives and why are they in our food?
Yeah, so food additives is anything added to a food. So it can be a mold inhibitor, a preservative, anti-caking agent, flavors, colors. Any way that you want a food to behave, you can add something to behave that way.
Okay, because the companies, I've read this before, they actually do a lot of research on human psychology, how the brain works. So the brain lights up when they see a bright color, or our brain lights up when they smell a certain smell. And so they're putting these chemicals in to try to attract us to them and sell more, I imagine. We often hear about these dyes and how bad they are for our health, and many other countries have even banned some of them. We know Europe, they talk about it all the time in the media. Europe has banned certain chemicals that the U.S. has not. How is that decided?
Yeah, so I read the MAHA Commission report to see which additives are of concern right now, and the way that these additives can get into our food supply is something called generally recognized as safe. So they can independently claim that a certain amount is generally recognized as safe, but the problem is we don't know how much we're actually consuming. There's this cumulative consumption effect where there's a ton of additives just in one food. They're meant to override our hunger and fullness cues, and so we typically eat more than the serving size listed on there. So there's additives like your food dyes, which we know with red number 3 has a link to cancer, red number 40 with the behavioral issues and the attention deficit issues. We have something like titanium dioxide, which is a whitener, has issues with cellular and DNA damage. I mean, the list goes on. And so there's some sort of negative association with a lot of these additives, but because it's not directly to cancer, the FDA doesn't have to necessarily ban them until now, where we're seeing that it's actually, maybe we can do something about that.
Now, are there any other laws in place to kind of help regulate these additives and these dyes?
So I'm hopeful that right now, with the red number 3 being banned by the end of 2026, the next is these other 6 petroleum-based dyes to be banned as well. So in Europe, if they can't prove that it is safe, then they don't allow it. Whereas our additives here, it's kind of like proven innocent until guilty. And so by then you hear all these, negative side effects and these negative health associations. And so, I'm very interested to see what will happen, but I am thankful at least that these are being brought to our attention, and we have a lot of great advocates and research being done to show like these should not be consumed.
Okay, so we actually have some food items here. We want to go over it because, the government is going to do what the government does, so we have to do our best as parents, and Taylor's going to help us do that. So you brought a few items that we can look at, and let's try to leave them there just so the camera can do their work, but if you could kind of point to them while you talk to them, that will help. So what are some things that you look at as a dietitian? You're going to the grocery store. How can we have your brain?
So I always look at ingredients, because I think as a culture, we're always looking at the calories because, we don't want to overeat calories, or really it should be the quality and what we're actually putting in our bodies, which is where these additives kind of have an effect there that we don't love. So for example, this peanut butter from Costco is just 2 ingredients. You have the peanuts and the salt, whereas this one has 6 different ingredients, some being mono and diglycerides. You have other hydrogenated oils put in there, when really, real food has properties and we want them to maintain those, but sometimes when a company is trying to sell a product, you don't want the oil to separate at the top, because then maybe somebody doesn't want to buy it. So you have things that don't allow that, when really just give it a good stir, put in the fridge, and separation gone. Okay. So ingredients is what I would focus on.
So you're saying the smaller peanut butter here has additives in there to try to keep it from separating. The larger one here does not. So, I mean, that's one product that has less additives. So the larger one in this scenario would be a better one based off of your expertise as a dietitian.
Yeah, because we're looking at real food. That's what we want. When you have these these ultra processed food with additives, we're adding in things that aren't real food. And so then it's also tricking us thinking that this is how real food should look. And we're not getting the chance to actually appreciate real food for what it is. Yeah.
Good point. Okay, so I see your next products here.
Yes.
I have a yogurt almost every day.
Okay. All right. What's the brand that you typically like to eat?
I typically go for a Greek yogurt, and a lot of times it ends up being the Oikos brand because I'm looking for less sugar and I'm looking for protein.
Okay. Okay. Great choice. I would say if you can keep it plain, that's the best way to not have as many additives when you start to add stuff in.
Okay.
You know, as Greek yogurt can separate and be watery, and if you're trying to do like a soy milk base versus like a cow's milk base, then you have to add things to help it not be gritty, so it stays together. Preserve, like this here has, I would say, at least 15 different ingredients, and there's only 2 things that are actually real food, which would be the soybeans and the strawberries. Everything else is added as a thickener or as a color preservative, that type of thing. And the color here is actually this brown color. We can compare the colors here in a second, but this Yoplait one, it's marketed light and fit instead of actually looking at what we're consuming here on the ingredients. This has the most ingredients in all of these.
Because it says 80 calories.
Right.
So, as Americans, we're trained to a lot of times, because America has a problem with obesity, we're looking at the calorie count, but this, you're saying, has a lot of chemicals and sugar in it.
Yeah, and so some of those can even override the way that we perceive the food, so then you can actually eat more of something that's not as real food, and you don't have the fiber and the vitamins and minerals in it as you would if you just ate like this Greek yogurt here I made at home, which just has a little bit of pure maple syrup, frozen raspberries, and then it still is just as sweet, tastes just as good, and is a nice pink color, whereas that Yoplait even has red 40 added to it. So it enhances this color to make it seem like this is a bright strawberry.
We'll tip it just to show the viewers at home. So right now she's saying what she made in this glass container here that's shaking is a more natural color than what you see the other 2 products. And you got to ask yourself, how did they get those colors in those products? So.
Right. Same with even just the flavor. It's an artificial flavor we're adding, not really like embracing the fruit for how sweet it can be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Good point. Okay, and then I see some other products over here. What do we need to know about these? I see we got some candy here.
Yes. So the candy is if you want a good alternative to your typical candies, because things like places like Trader Joe's and Aldi, they don't use artificial colors, and I know Trader Joe's doesn't use artificial flavors either. So if that's something really important that you definitely don't want dyes, there are alternatives that you can get at those stores, but also there's a brand called Yum Earth and Unreal. And so they have a lot of your typical, like that would be like a Sour Patch Kid alternative. And then you have like an M&M, or you have these sour jelly beans and even sprinkles here. And I added the freeze-dried raspberries and the turmeric just to show that you can color food in a more natural way with real food using those things instead of artificial colors as well.
So what about organic items? That is a whole thing in and of itself, and it's a popular thing that's happening right now. People are seeking out those options. Yeah,
I know organic, they say, oh, it's more expensive, but it depends on what you're buying. So for me, I focus on organic of the things we eat the most, because that would have the most exposure to these pesticides and herbicides that they're spraying on the food. And so if it's not something you eat a lot, I wouldn't say you're getting as much exposure to that. But the thing with organic too is that some of those food additives that's in that MAHA Commission report, they're not allowed in there. And so for that reason, I think if you are like, okay, I definitely don't want this additive, it's not allowed in this organic produce or this organic ultra processed food item, then at least you know that that specific additive won't be in there, and then maybe you don't read the ingredients this time. But I still recommend doing that, because no company is perfect, no government agency is perfect, and the best way that you can figure out what works best for you guys is to read the labels. But organic has a place, and it is unfortunate that it costs more than conventionally grown, because usually it tastes better. And so if you can, do it, but also I would say if you can't, the EWG, have you heard of them? They're the Environmental Working Group. Yeah, they have like a dirty dozen and a clean 15 for produce. So the ones that are more susceptible to the pesticides and herbicides would be the dirty dozen. So then if you were to choose organic, choose those. But then the clean 15, conventionally grown and non-organic would be okay for those.
Okay. So we are going to pop something up on the screen that, and it showed actually the difference between a cereal that is in the U.S. and a cereal that is also sold in Europe. And you could see that the list of ingredients for Europe is much shorter than the list of ingredients for the U.S. And so this is a normal thing that's occurring. I guess you brought this to show us what?
Yeah, so if you look at the ingredients for the U.S., like you mentioned, is a much longer list, and there's very few items that are actually real food. All of it's additives. But what's concerning and what is so frustrating for families is knowing that this product, should you choose to consume an ultra-processed food like a cereal, is you should have a safe option. And they can make it. In Europe, they have those. So it's not that they don't know how to make alternatives and make a safer product for us to consume if we choose to, is they just don't. So now they will have to for some of those artificial flavors, at least by the end of next year. Okay. And so as you can see with the U.S., you have artificial colors, whereas Europe you don't. And you have that preservative, the BHA or BHT in there as well, which you don't necessarily need.
Yeah, I gotta say, this is all overwhelming as a parent. You are a dietitian, so this is what you do by trade. There are a lot of other people that are just, they want to get a healthy meal. Of course, every parent wants the best thing for their kid, but it is overwhelming reading these labels and not knowing what they mean. Yeah. Do you have any advice or tips or encouragement for those parents who are just trying to get it going? And it can be expensive too.
Right. So you can always read the label, but I want you to focus on the ingredients because that's what matters. I would say the shorter the list the possible, just like the peanut butters, right? Like you have an option of just peanuts and salt. You don't need all the other stuff. And if you can't pronounce it, then maybe you shouldn't buy it. Or if you don't know what it is, then maybe consider something else. And so give yourself the opportunity to also experiment with real food because food can taste good, have a lot of flavor, and be naturally sweet. But we just sometimes have to step away from like the artificial sweeteners that are like 1,000 times sweeter than normal sugar. And so just allow yourself to just take it one thing at a time, maybe focus on something that you consume the most of, and then also be sure to educate your children. So I have to brag on my oldest because, you know, yes, I do this by trade, but it's not something that I would say that we learn. It's something that as a mom, I've taught myself and as someone that loves food so much and wants to educate. So over time, and I mean, she's 11, so I've had a while to work on her, but I've got 2 younger ones, and she knows how we feel as a family about the artificial dyes specifically, and especially red number 3 with the link to cancer. So we were at the zoo and there was a rock candy that was red, and so she looked at the label on the back and saw it had red number 3, and she chose not to get it. And she's my sweets girl, so if you offer her up a treat or something, she'll be the first one to say, yeah, let's eat, and how much can I have? Yeah. So I was but it just, you have to educate yourself, and you know, like I said, companies aren't perfect, and so the best way to do that is to get very familiar with the label, and then also if you need some resources, this is one of the books, but there's also some other resources too. But this is called Feeding You Lies from Vannie Harry. She's the food babe. She does a lot of advocacy for getting this stuff out of the foods that we have because it was from a personal experience all the way back from 2011. And so now she's a huge advocate helping us get these food additives out of our food system. Yeah. I mentioned the Environmental Working Group. That's another great one. And then if you really just want a research to see like, hey, Taylor, where is all this coming from? Are you just making this up? Is it just your opinion? No, there's something called Center for, I think it's called the Science of the Public Interest, CSPI, and they do a lot of the research for the food additives, and they have an area where you can search if something is considered like a safe additive or not, because some are okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. We know that this is a lot, but it's certainly insightful, and I hear you telling parents, at least take the step and try doing the best you can, obviously, but trying to take a step in the right direction. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for having me.